Good afternoon, everybody. Unfortunately, yesterday's recording didn't work out well. Um, so I'm going to go over a quick overview of what you need to know from Wednesday's class. Um, and then I have a couple of housekeeping updates as well. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways to make sense of politics. Last class, we talked about how politics is essentially how we deal with the disagreements that everybody has living together in a society. Today, we're going to talk about kind of that a little bit more and 2 other ways to make sense of it. So basically, we're going to look at how do conflicts, political processes, and everyday choices make political outcomes explainable. By the end of this class, I want you to be able to distinguish 3 recurring ideas. Politics is basically conflict, processes matter, and politics is everywhere. And I want you to be able to analyze a situation as preferences, rules, or processes, and then the outcome. And then finally, I want you to explain why the same preferences can yield different outcomes under different rules. So we talked about this briefly, but to kind of give you the big overview, politics is conflict, the processes matter, and politics is everywhere. So let's start with politics is conflict. So where do conflicts actually come from? There are lots of different things we disagree on. For example, we might disagree on the right way to do something or whether or not we should do something at all. But there are basically going to be 5 sources for conflicts when we start thinking about it. First is going to be interests. Who gains, who pays, and who bears the risk. We tend not to really care too much about things that we're not interested in. How many of you guys care about the proposed changes to the requirements for registering as a cosmetologist? Probably not many of you, because probably most of you have not gone to cosmetology school. That's why you're here. Because you're not interested, this is not something that is going to be a big conflict for you. But there are different things that are big conflicts for us, like taxation or how much tuition costs. I had a student in class who said that she wanted to be able to go into the cafeteria and eat, well, at least hang out with her friends without having to pay for a meal. In this, all the students would gain from the ability to have conversations and stuff like this, but there's the possibility of people who are going to eat food that they're not having paid for. And because of that, Sodexo, the food service company, is going to bear the risk of that particular thing. So when we're talking about conflicts, frequently one of the big things we have to consider is who gains from the proposal, who pays for it, and who bears the risk. Second, values. What people believe should matter. We have tons of values about things. What religion you believe in, what sports team you think is the best, your ideas of how people should interact in society. And this has a profound impact on the way that we think that society should provide for things. For example, um, one thing I frequently hear about from older people is that millennials are lazy or Gen Z is lazy. Most of my students identify as Gen Z. I don't think I have any Gen Alphas yet. Thank God. That's going to make me feel even older than I already feel. But that is a value. They believe that they had to work hard. They believe that everybody should work hard. And they don't value the same things that we might value. For example, younger generations tend to value individual expression. They tend to value their free time a lot more so than older people seem to. Similarly, we might have value sort of things like religious beliefs, or a particular practice is completely off the table because you believe that that is antithetical to your religion. Or you might believe that the government should stay out of people's business. These are big, bright line things that come from your sense of who you are that shape how you think the world should run. Information is another critical thing, and this, I think, is becoming an increasingly important source of conflict. What people know and what they trust increasingly is going to shape the conflicts that we have as a society. In Missouri right now, there is a massive push to um, basically eliminate trans people competing in the sports of whatever gender they are. So, is this a big deal? Probably not. But if you talk to legislators or if you talk to the proponents of this, they think that it's a rampant problem and they trust the facts that they're receiving. Realistically, I think the number by the Secretary of State's admission is something like 5 or 6 kids across the state of Missouri participate in sports for which they are not biologically assigned to that gender. Um, we get information all the time from Snapchat to TikTok to Facebook, if you're on that still, YouTube. All of these different things are telling us what we should think. And if we trust it, we might be thinking of a certain way about a political procedure or a proposal that may or may not be true. One of the best examples I have for this is that during President Trump's first election, I saw on CNN a thing that said, Donald Trump says the Pope isn't Christian. And I thought to myself, this is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. Of course, the Pope is Christian. Catholicism, after all, it believes in Christ, right? Then I read the article, and it turns out that CNN had published this article responding to, actually quoting Trump, but basically responding to something that he said in response to something the Pope said. Or let's put it this way, a CNN article that he had read that the Pope said. In that article, CNN claims that the Pope calls out Donald Trump for not being Christian. Okay, same allegation. Well, what did the Pope actually say? At a sermon in Argentina, the Pope said that as Christians, we're called to break down walls, not build walls to divide us. Now, if you vastly exaggerate the scope of that statement, you could say that this is a reference to the border wall, but more likely, since this is something that's a pretty common theme in Christianity and everything, it was just a way of expressing that idea. And so basically what we have is this massive massive overreaction to something that shouldn't be a big deal. But because of that, it is a big deal. We have conflict. Next, we have assumptions. This is the beliefs about causes and consequences. Our assumptions are going to be our beliefs about the causes and consequences of various actions. For example, trickle-down economics is a theory in which economists think that if they give tax breaks to the rich, then the rich people are going to spend that money, and that money they spend is then going to benefit people with less income. The consequence of decreasing the taxes on the rich is going to be a more natural boost to the economy than if you cut taxes across the board or cut taxes on the poor only. Do I believe in this? No. I don't think that this is something that really works that way. My assumption is that people who have lots of money hoard that money. And so that becomes another source of conflict. Finally, the costs and benefits of things, how the burdens and advantages are distributed. A lot of people don't really seem to care for social welfare programs like Social Security, Disability, Medicaid, Medicare. And the reason for this is because they believe that they shouldn't have to bear the cost of other people's lives, right? Like if you have to pay for Medicaid as an employee paying taxes, then you're basically paying for somebody else to be part of a system you're not actively enjoying. On the other hand, the benefit of this being spread out among lots of different individuals makes the cost per payee a lot less than if you were to have to pay for it yourself. For example, let's say that you have a profound disability and you are required to be in an assisted living facility of some sort. The cost of that could be $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, not something most people can afford. But if we were to have the taxpayers basically foot the bill for that, it's something that all of a sudden becomes more reasonable. Now, what we're going to talk about for the rest of this class and then moving into the rest of the semester is basically going to be the process. When we have these different preferences that come from conflict, or the basic preferences that cause the conflict, the way that we solve that conflict is going to have a profound impact on the outcome. So if we ask questions like, who gets to decide which proposition goes forward, which alternatives reach the agenda, what rule selects a winner, and who can block, revise, or implement a proposal, we're going to see that the outcome differs. Preferences, filtered through the lens of rules and processes, equals outcomes. Preferences describe what participants want, but the rules determine the available path. The outcome is the resulting product that actually makes it through the path. If we take a couple of examples, for example, let's say that we have two different ways that we can get things done at Lincoln. We're deciding as a university, are we going to do things with a plurality vote of the students, or are we going to have a committee? If we have a proposal like, should we have 1 week, 2 weeks, or no weeks of spring break, and we send it to a plurality vote, what do you guys think is going to win? I want to be clear about this. A plurality is different from a majority. In a majority vote, the person has to get 51% of the vote, or 50 plus 1% of the vote, technically. In a plurality, whoever has more wins. So if we have proposal A, B, and C, and they get 33%, 33%, and 34% of the vote, proposal C wins. It hasn't received the majority of votes, but it has received more than any of the other outcomes. If we send this proposal then to a vote of the students, what do you think is going to happen? Obviously, most students are going to vote for a 2-week spring break. Maybe there's consequences associated with that, like, okay, we'll have a 2-week spring break, but you're going to have to go an extra week into the summer, and people say no, but I still think probably 2 weeks of spring break will win. If we change the procedure, though, and we talk about committee review, and we have a situation where a committee, probably made up of your student government, is going to review a particular proposal, and then they're going to make a recommendation to the administration of what they're going to do. And finally, the administration is going to make the final choice from all of the available recommendations. The outcome is going to be far less certain. In fact, most likely, the administrators, considering things like how long they have to pay faculty and benefits and things like that, are going to choose the option of 1 week of spring break, regardless of what the committee proposes. If the committee even proposes to do a 2-week spring break. If everyone's preferences remain unchanged, does the outcome remain unchanged? And the answer is no, of course not. When we change the procedure, it is going to change how the preferences are interpreted into the outcome. We're going to skip that, but I want to conclude by just telling you guys a couple of housekeeping things and noting that this is what we're going to talk about for the remainder of the class. Because now that we have covered the kind of philosophy of why we have a government, how preferences are filtered through procedures to get the outcome, most of this course is devoted to how in the United States we do that. What are the procedures and rules that govern how we develop outcomes here? An important note, if you are not registered to vote, Missouri has really interesting things on the ballots, both in the primary a couple of weeks ago and coming up in the general election in November, that significantly changed the rules. So for example, in Missouri, we enjoy something called an initiative petition. Basically, the way that this works is that if the Missouri voters think that we should have something like recreational marijuana, they can collect enough signatures, and if they get enough signatures, then that goes onto the ballot. If it goes onto the ballot, then a simple majority vote either enacts that law or enacts the constitutional amendment. The Missouri legislature doesn't like this very much. Missouri is comprised of several large cities like St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, and Columbia. And on the flip side, lots of rural areas that tend to be more conservative, whereas the cities tend to be more liberal. As a result, because the state is divided up into counties and that has like a geographical representation, and so are the House districts and the Senate districts, the Missouri legislature is mostly comprised of conservatives, whereas by population, most of the state is liberal. When we have things like medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, or the right to abortion pass, it makes the legislature pretty angry because they think that they should be the ones who get to decide this. So what the Missouri legislators wanted to do is take away the initiative petition process and change it to something where you had to get a majority in each and every congressional district. The issue with this is that from a practical standpoint, something like 80% of Missouri voters would have to support an initiative. Finally, in November, there's going to be an amendment to basically overturn the right to an abortion. So the Missouri legislature decided, after the voters voted in favor of creating a constitutionally protected right to an abortion, that Missourians really don't need that, and have put onto the ballot Amendment 3 trying to repeal that right. Again, if you're not registered to vote, this is the way that you can directly influence the outcome of how these rules shape the life that you enjoy. A couple of housekeeping things. I have added the chapters for the textbook into your modules, so hopefully that opens for you guys pretty easily. If you have any problems getting onto the textbook, please let me know. Otherwise, please continue to reach out, make sure you're working on your assignments, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. Have a great evening. The next lecture will be posted Friday at some point.